Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and I'm delighted that you're here today, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast. This is a very important episode today, and I am very grateful to Jared Hudson, who is going to be joining me today to share his work in Covenant Rescue Group, which was founded in 2019 by Jared and his wife. Jared is a former Navy SEAL, and the work that he is doing with Covenant Rescue Group is something that I think is going to be mind-blowing to you, inspiring, and quite educational. So, Jared, thank you for taking time to be on the SavvyCast today.
Thanks for having me.
Jared, I know we're diving into a very grave topic, but I always start my podcast with the icebreaker. What would you choose as your last meal? Because we're all going to have one.
All right, what would I choose as that is true. We're all gonna have a last meal. What I choose as my last meal? If I got to choose it, my wife makes a sausage kale soup that I love, and I think I would have that. It's phenomenal. She'll put about 4 pounds of sausage in it, and she's got friends that have a farm, so we normally get a cow and a pig slaughtered every year, and then I hunt. We have all kinds of game meat, but she'll put any of that in it. But most of the time, it is like fresh sausage from a friend's farm. So I would do that. Probably an ice cold Topo Chico. I like that bougie water, that club soda based water. Topo Chico is the brand that I like. And
in the bottles.
Yeah, in a glass bottle. And when I'm done with it, of course, you've got a lot of female listeners, so they might not like this as much. I quit dipping in 2011, but if it's my last meal, I would have once I finish that in the Topo Chico, I'd put a big dip of Copenhagen silver top in my lip and lay back and enjoy the last few minutes that I had.
Oh my God. I think that's fine. It's your last one. So go into glory, however. So that's awesome.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jared, I learned about you and your organization through the passion that my son-in-law now has for the work that you're doing, Sean Hiller, and there is an event coming up in in Birmingham, a night of hope and freedom. That is going to be February 7th. I'm going to be sharing that a lot, hoping to get people that are able to come. But for today, we have people everywhere. Can you explain, first of all, what is Covenant Rescue Group and how did you get involved? How did you start as the founder of this organization?
Yeah, so Covenant Rescue Group is we're a 501c3 nonprofit. I think we started in 2018, but got our 501c3 status in 2019. So it took like maybe it was 6 or 8 months to get that 501c3 status. And so 2019, we got that. And we combat human trafficking. We're an anti-human trafficking organization, primarily as it relates to child sexual exploitation. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit and what that means, but that is our that is what we do. Our goal is to train, equip, so through like actual equipment, the physical needs of whoever it is that is going out to combat it, to include ourselves, but train, equip, and then facilitate operations that lead to arrests, prosecutions, and then rescues of kids being trafficked.
Okay, so are you just within the United States, or what is your demographic?
So we work all over the world. I was actually in Zambia last year, and we've been requested by the I think it's called Permanent Secretary and the President of Zambia to come over and do the type of operations we do in Zambia. They're kind of a first world country in Africa. They're not first world, but they're a well-off country in sub-Saharan Africa. I've worked in South Sudan, Haiti, Central America. So we've worked all over the world. We're in Israel when the hostages were taken with Hamas. We worked with them trying to get some of the hostages. And so we've worked all over the world, but our primary focus is here in the U.S. And really what started that was when COVID kicked off. It kind of limited our travel in a lot of the places that we were going. And so we said, all right, well, I'm a law enforcement officer, still a law enforcement officer. Most of the individuals on our team are law enforcement officers. We're like, hey, we've kind of got, the ability to fill a niche that nobody else is doing, and that is working with and supporting law enforcement here stateside. So that was 2019 into 2020 as COVID started taking place, limiting our travel. We started focusing on the stateside the stateside operation, training and operations. And the Lord, I'm a Christian, so I believe the Lord opens and closes doors. By a Christian, I mean Jesus died, rose again on the third day for my sins and yours, and it's through him we're set free. That's what I mean. A lot of people say they're Christian, but they might not believe what it actually is. So I'm a Christian. I believe God opens and closes doors, and he opened the doors for the stateside work for us. And that's really, in all honesty, where we've been at since. We still go overseas some, but our focus is primarily here stateside because there's not many organizations doing what we do stateside. Matter of fact, I don't know of any doing what we do stateside.
Now, when you say stateside, you mean in all of the United States?
I mean the 50 U.S. states.
Now, can you explain, are laws the same for what you're doing in every state, or are you having to abide by different laws in different states?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we'll have to abide by different laws in different states. The state of Alabama, we use 13A6-152, which would be human trafficking, primarily attempt in subsection B of that law. Sometimes you'll get a 13A6-111 charge, which is transmitting obscene material. But every state has a similar charge to that. So what we'll do, if like we worked in a couple of states we worked in last year, like Arkansas, Indiana, New Mexico, any of those places, we will get with the prosecutor and the agency we're going to work with. We'll say, hey, what are your child solicitation laws? What are your traveling, your electronic solicitation? Do you have a human trafficking law like Florida has a human trafficking law similar to ours? And once we look at that, we'll say, okay, these are the ones we need to look at, and then we'll use that code with that local agency, and we're looking to build felony cases based on that code. Mm-hmm. We don't really build the federal cases, again, because federal is more broad, right? But what happens, so I'm a federal TFO, task force officer, and we're partnered with the feds and a lot, U.S. Marshal Service, Homeland Security, FBI. They can't partner with nonprofits, but they partner with the local agencies. So we will bring the local agency and the feds oftentimes together, especially if they don't have a partnership already, to where then if the local agency makes a solid state case for solicitation, travel, human trafficking, any of those, right? Now the feds can make their state case if the U.S. attorney wants to proceed with it. So the feds would rather adopt a solid local or a solid state case as opposed to trying to make a case on their own. And that's the way it should work. We shouldn't lean on the federal government to make a lot of these cases. It should be done at the local level because, as John Locke said, the closest form of government to the people is the most effective form of government because they know it even better. And the reason I say that, you've probably seen on YouTube and all this, like these guys will chat somebody in, they're showing up to have sex with a 13-year-old girl, right? And they'll be in a Walmart parking lot and they'll beat them up and all that stuff. Well, that's not always good because sometimes, and most of the time, I'll be honest, it's not. One, you can't prosecute those guys because most of the time they've been entrapped. There's an entrapment aspect to it. And then number two, there's been quite a few times where we've seen it where the individual that shows up has a mental disability. One of the things that we've seen is they're autistic guys or autistic young men that they're not all there in the head. So now we have something that could be a criminal act and needs to be dealt with. But it's not really a criminal act because this person doesn't have the same mindset that you and I have. Does that make sense?
Let me ask you this on that note, because this was a show I watched religiously, To Catch a Predator.
Yeah, with Chris Hansen.
With Chris Hansen, and I just loved it. I loved Chris Hansen because he was catching them all. But were they able to? Is that considered an entrapment, or do you think was that just TV?
Yeah, most of those guys are not prosecuted. Chris Hansen works. I'm sworn with Blount County Sheriff's Office with Sheriff Mark Moon, and one of his big donors is good buddies with Chris Hansen, and they'll run ops together. It's very hard for them to catch them because, again, it doesn't match and it's not red tape of law enforcement. It's our Constitution. It's the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment. And even the Sixth Amendment that sometimes negatively impacts the cases when you have it as a TV show. Chris, I'm not saying I don't know what his intent is, what his heart is. I think he's a good guy, but when you're doing it for clicks and views in a TV show, it loses its weight, and so you now have a null pros, or you have a case that you can't prosecute. And why that's important, the American Psychiatric Association and Department of Justice did a study about 12, maybe 14 years ago, and you can look this up. They did a study to see child predators, how many victims they had. For every man who would show up for a little girl, let's say, right? For every, man, girl, or girl guy, but the common demographic is male. For every man showing up for a little girl, he had 50 victims, not before he was arrested, not before he was apprehended by law enforcement, before he was prosecuted. So see, there's two aspects to law enforcement. Apprehension, you've got to physically snatch somebody. Then you've got prosecution. You've got to make sure you take them all the way to the end of all your court proceedings, all that, and get a successful prosecution based on the state law or the federal law or whatever you're doing. And so 50 victims before they were successfully prosecuted. For every man showing up for a little boy, so same-sex situation, there was 150 victims before they were successfully prosecuted. So when we work with a law enforcement agency, we'll average 10 arrests. I mean, I think last year we did 9 operations and had 97 arrests total, if I remember right. I can't remember, but it was just under 100 for the 9 operations we did with local law enforcement and the feds tied in. Those 97 felony arrests, all 100% on prosecution, which is good. That's one of the big things that we push for is a successful prosecution. We're 100% on our prosecution rate so far. That would be, so let's say 100 guys. If you have an average of 100, you got 50 that would show up for boys, 150 that would show up for girls. So let's just take an average of that 100, right? That's 10,000 victims, according to that American Psychiatric Association and DOJ study that they did. I'm sure the numbers are a little bit different now, but that's 10,000 victims that were not impacted or that received justice that wouldn't have normally received justice. Because again, these guys are not criminals in the sense that law enforcement's going to roll them up in a drug deal or murdering somebody or something. They're not normal criminals. They're regular everyday citizens that work around us, live around us, that are into this and doing this thing targeting children. So that's why we focus on that.
Okay. Well, can you give us an idea of the scope of human or sex trafficking in the U.S.? As an aside, I was on your website, and you all obviously routinely post. Would it be called a sting or an undercover?
Yeah, if we run a sting or something. So all we'll do is we'll repost what the agency puts out. So oftentimes what will happen, let's say we run an operation, a training and operation Wednesday, Thursday, Friday the following week, right? Wednesday training day, Thursday run training, run an op that night, Friday run an op, and we just kind of oversee. When I was in the SEAL teams, or any of our guys that work with us, or MARSOC, SF, SEAL, whatever, we did a combat advisor role, right? And so overseas, we would do a combat advisor role. We view it in the same way. We're on the operation with the law enforcement agency, but we're not really conducting it. We're advising them and making sure that they do it appropriately. That's how we do this. So when they do that, if they choose to do a press release, which most of them do, some of them don't. So you don't see all of the operation we do, but most of them will do a press release that following Monday or Tuesday. And when they do, we'll repost that press release. If they ask us to come speak at the press release, we will. But again, we're just trainers and advisors for that law enforcement agency. And then we put together a real live operation for kind of on the job training to show them, hey, we know we just taught you this. We want to prove to you that it works. And that's what we do. So when you see those things reposted, those are normally just, or see those things posted on our site, they're just a repost of what that agency has already put out.
Okay. Well, and what shocked me was how close to home geographically some of those were that I happened to see. Lee County, which is Auburn. I went to Auburn. Is that going to be the case in every state? There's give us an idea of the scope and if it varies state to state or how that looks.
Yeah, no, it doesn't vary. It's pretty much the same thing. So another statistic I'll give you, and this came, I think, strictly from a study the American Psychiatric Association did, 57% of individuals who target kids, or let's say kids or that are impacted through sexual exploitation, 57% are known to the kid. Now, I'm not talking about family member. This is 57% that would be teacher, coach, doctors. It's somebody that the child would trust or know, right? Babysitter, any of those things. 36% is a family member, and 7% is unknown to the victim. So the idea that we believe exists in human trafficking, that there's people out there just stealing kids, just some unknown organizations stealing kids and trafficking them all over the place, that just doesn't exist. I've been in this game for a long time. Even overseas, it doesn't exist. It's not real. It's a lie. It's really a misunderstanding of what actually exists. Does that happen? Yeah, sort of. Very small percentage of time, so small that you almost can't target it. And almost everything you do target brings you back to somehow that child or that young man or young woman was known by the individuals that took them and did X, Y, and Z, or they knew the individuals that did. So there's always that level of trust that exists within that. So again, we're looking to target that 93%. So that would be the first thing. Most of it's familia based. The second thing is it's a percentage game. But if we had a profile set up for a young lady, let's say, and for a sex profile where people will reach out to purchase somebody for sex, right? We've got those all over the internet. If we have a profile like that set up where this young woman's selling herself for sex, and somebody reaches out and we say, hey, yeah, we're available $100 for X, Y, and Z. You cool with younger chicks? And they'll say, how young? I'm just kind of giving you an idea how a chat normally goes. How young? I'm almost 15. That might be something that's said, right? If you chat 1,000 individuals with that same profile and that same little message thread right there, you chat 1,000 individuals, 900 of them will tell you to pound sand or not talk to you anymore. Now, we're talking about people who are not doing the right thing, nefarious activity. They're looking for a hooker for the weekend, or they're on a work trip, they're cheating on their wife or whatever it is, right? But they're simply looking just to purchase an of-age consenting adult for sex. Doesn't mean it's right, but it's also a misdemeanor crime in most states, right? I think in Texas, it's a felony now to purchase somebody for sex. But either way, that is not human trafficking. Sometimes it is, but generally speaking, that 900, it's hard to find out who in there is actually trying to traffic somebody and who isn't just, cheating on their wife. So those 900 people won't talk to you anymore. 100 of the individuals will entertain it. Even though they know you're 14, they will entertain showing up to meet you in the conversation. And of those 100, 10, so 1% of everybody you talk to, 10 will actually show up to buy the child for sex. And that's who we're targeting specifically. We're targeting that 1% who are actually going to show up to purchase a child. And it's really just a numbers game.
Okay, that is amazing. Now, since you said the majority already know the predator, how do you get access to the child to set up the sting? How does that all transpire?
No, that's great. So there is no way, especially since they know the predator. And if you talk to any victim, I guess, who's been exposed to this or gone through this, or heard a woman tell an unbelievable story. Her testimony the other night: she was raped when she was 3, and she was sold after that for years. And of course, she's got saved now. Christ changed her life. She's acting as a counselor, and she still has a lot of stuff she deals with. She talks about it. She was saying that it's hard for her. She wouldn't talk to anybody. Now you got to have somebody. If we actually look at the child to go after this predator that's dealing with this child, well, this child or this person that's been negatively impacted by their predator, based on our Constitution, they have to testify against. We need a witness in this case, because under the Fifth Amendment, this guy's not going to be a witness against himself, right? So the Fifth Amendment is kind of what protects, because they're not going to incriminate themselves. So you got to have a witness. And now what you're asking a victim to do, you also got some massive issues mentally and emotionally with a child, a young woman who's been victimized by an individual, a grown man. Now you got to have them sit on a stand and oftentimes be the witness in this case. So it makes it very difficult to do. And there's a lot of NGOs, a lot of aftercare facilities and counselors that I've talked to, and psychologists, things say, hey, she doesn't need to be a witness. Okay, well, if we want to put this bad guy away who did X, Y, and Z to her, we've got to have her for a witness. So you have this law enforcement looking at it, hey, we want to go after human trafficking. We want to protect these young women who are being assaulted and sold or whatever by, nefarious individuals. You've got the NGOs or the nonprofits that, hey, we want to protect and take care of these young ladies. They're looking at the victim. Law enforcement is looking at the perpetrator. And they're trying to fix the same problem, but they both have something different that they're shooting at. What we've done is, because we're an NGO, we are a nonprofit, we understand victim advocacy, and that's what a lot of your donors, that's what a lot of people want to support and fund. We want to help victims. But we're also law enforcement officers. We understand that you've got to hunt the bad guy that's doing this. We've got to nip it in the bud. We can't just always have a knee-jerk reaction to a victim. How can we target these individuals without negatively impacting a victim? So our team, bringing our minds together, what we've done is we have decoys that we train. They're not children. They're girls who we can make look young, 13 to 15. And we set up a decoy-based operation in states, because this is something we can do, because all we've got to show is the intent. And the intent that we show comes through the messages on the cellular device, the phone or email or whatever.
Their phone when they are arrested. You can.
Oh yeah, we always get, because we have to get it, they're gonna turn it over as property. They get searched, subject to arrest, get their phone. And sometimes they'll give us consent to search their phone. Sometimes they won't. We can get a warrant to rip the phone, and we'll get the data off of their phone based on a warrant, because that phone is now the probable cause for a search. So that goes into the Fourth Amendment, right? Everybody is protected in their houses, their persons, their papers, their all that stuff. And well, your phone and your emails and all that now falls under Fourth Amendment protections. So what we'll do, unless of course you have probable cause to obtain a warrant, well, now we'll just get probable cause to obtain a warrant and search the phone, because this is what the probable cause of our case is built on anyway. They were messaging us thinking they were talking to a 13 or 14-year-old girl, or talking to a dad who's selling his 13 or 14-year-old daughter or whatever, right? And so once we build that, we now have enough to get information off this phone. Now, this is where it gets really exciting with catching the bad guys and finding victims. I'll give you a real case, and I believe this was in Mississippi. We chatted somebody into Mississippi from a different state, actually, which doesn't really matter that much, but they came from a different state. We rolled them. They thought they were showing up to purchase a 14-year-old girl for sex. When they purchased that 14-year-old girl, or when they showed up for what they thought was a 14-year-old girl, we arrest them, take them through the process, just like what you've seen in the Chris Hansen shows, except now the judge issues a warrant, go through our systems, and we get the warrant, we get the data off the phone. He had over 1,000 images of child pornography on his phone, but it wasn't just any child pornography. He was making the porn. He was producing the child pornography with his own 18-month-old daughter. So he was having sex with his 18-month-old daughter, doing things to her, and he was producing and selling that pornography. So now the feds really want to get involved in that. Homeland Security got involved on that end and took it all the way forward, and that individual got state and federal charges. That's how you can get into the system. If you want to kill the beast, you got to get inside the belly of the beast and cut him out from the inside. And that's what we're doing. You get into the belly of the beast with individuals who are showing up to purchase underage kids for sex, and you generally find more things, more nefarious activity, to include labor trafficking and all that sort of stuff you can tap into. But that's kind of how you find it and how you rescue the victims.
That is how do you handle looking at a person like that? Are they even human? What is wrong with them?
Yeah, there's definitely the Bible tells us that sexual sin, you sin against your own body. I think a lot of times, the sexual sin can come through pornography, just what you see constantly happening to the mind, especially with men. Women, I'll be honest with you, women, it's more of a mindset thing. It's not so much the visual of pornography, but it's the story that's told, right? It's this fake love story that's told, and that's where we see little girls falling prey to a lot of this, right? So without getting too much into it, boys will give themselves physically to something, then they'll give their heart. Girls will give their heart to something, then they'll give themselves physically, right? And it's the same thing with men and women. So for men showing up to it, they give themselves physically, they give their eyes, they give their mind, and you see that constant degradation of what reality is, what God made between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. You see that degradation in mind through pornography, and it just continues to go until next thing you know, individuals are into super weird stuff, and it's a sin against your own body. So I do believe you're exactly right. Something is unbelievably wrong with the mind, yet we're all unbelievably sinful. I do believe in grace and mercy, and I believe that Christ's grace and mercy extends to those individuals who would even target kids. With that being said, I haven't seen individuals, once they get to that point, reverse course. I've never seen it.
And for those who, like we do, believe Scripture, if you cause a little one to stumble, it's better than a millstone be hung around your neck and you be drowned.
Yeah, and thrown in the ocean and drowned. Yeah, that's right.
Now, I do want to ask, and I know we're getting off, there's so many questions, but for a man to be doing that to that level with an 18-month-old, where is the mother? Where are the other how does that happen
Yeah.
in a normal world?
Now, I do know that when they found out, yeah, this guy's wife legitimately, and you'll bring this in interviews, and sometimes the mother knows, sometimes, people know, sometimes, that, again, blood is thicker than spit sort of thing. So when it's a family, they'll keep things kind of in. With that being said, she really didn't know. And so that is important that you, as fathers, as mothers, you are really being cognizant of what's going on with your kids. As far as killing them, I mean, there's places overseas like South Sudan, when they would attack people on the road to Juba, from Nimali to Juba. We work with them some on counter ambush stuff. You ain't put anybody in jail over there. That's what you do. You just kill them. I mean, that's it. Hey, you're going to attack and steal these women. All right, cool. We're going to pretend to be women. You attack us. Now we kill you, and it's done. So there is that happens in some places, but we live in a first world country, so we have to have a successful prosecution. And that's why I'm not big on the Hanson stuff. That's why I'm not big on the stuff on Facebook where they shake it in their face. Hey, you're on this phone. You said X, Y, and Z. You're not doing anything. You've got to have that successful prosecution, because if you don't, your only other option is to show up and kill them. But that's vigilante justice, and that's outside of what we outline as the thing that makes us Americans, which is our first 10 amendments, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution. So that's kind of what you try to work with.
Well, we want to, and I've got other questions, but I do know, and he's going to be sworn in next week, that President Trump says that he will make an immediate law where first-time offenders of minors will get life in prison. Do you think that will happen, and will it make a dent?
No, probably not, because that's going to be federal. He can only do stuff that's federal, and he's a president, so he's not going to legislate. You've got your congressmen, your senators, they're your legislators. They're the ones who create law. So, I mean, he can make some executive orders, but do I think that he'll push to up the ante on some stuff? Yeah. Do I think that a lot of that's political talk and political narrative? And he might have a sincere heart about it. Now, I don't know his heart on it, and I'm a big Trump guy. I'm not against Trump or what he wants to do. I'm just saying, I don't see how that's going to really make any difference, because most of the time you've got to hit it at the micro level, at the local level, for it to actually carry any impact. Now, if there is a federal charge or something federal that happens where, like what I just told you, the story I just told you, and that individual gets life in prison as opposed to the 30 or 50 years or whatever it is he got with, with his conviction that we were a part of a couple years ago, that would be great. But do I think it's going to make any difference? No, I don't. I think it's just a talking point.
So we have to talk to, if we are politically inclined, we talk to our local officials, our senators, our representatives.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it. Really, your local law enforcement running these type of operations, and law enforcement doesn't do it. You live in Shelby County, correct?
I am in Hoover, city of Hoover, and then Jefferson.
Okay, so you're in Jefferson County. So, I talked with Shelby County Sheriff Sam Diego, who I know pretty well, and he's a nice guy. But he said, "Hey, no, we don't want to. We're not going to work with y'all anyway. I don't know about small or local agencies, but we're doing this stuff." All right, cool. I appreciate it, but they're not doing it. And I know they're not, because I know the operations are doing. They're not doing these style of operations. There's no local law enforcement who really are. And when they do, they get the apprehension, but rarely do they get a successful prosecution, because they don't do the appropriate things for a successful prosecution. So you've got to have that local prosecutor involved in depth if you're going to actually make a successful case. And we just haven't seen local law enforcement work in that capacity. And it's not a hit on local law enforcement. They haven't been taught how to do this. They work on the ICAC stuff, the Internet Crimes Against Children, long-term chats off of leads and tips. They're trying to find that individual, like the guy we arrested, who is having sex or is targeting younger people, but they're trying to find it without entrapping them. And the way we do it through decoy-based operations is a way that you can find them without entrapping them, and find them really quickly. Find them when you build felony cases in 3 hours or less, as opposed to having to spend a year doing it.
Okay, so your process, just give us a snippet. Walk us through a rescue operation from identifying a victim to recovering the victim, to putting them toward the toward the criminal prosecution?
So a rescue is going to be different than a sting. Sting is what we work with law enforcement with the sole focus on apprehension and prosecution of a perpetrator of a bad guy who is targeting kids. A rescue is where we specifically look at and outline women, children, young men who are in the sex work industry, possibly being trafficked, and we work with other NGOs to successfully rescue them out of that. So these are two different types of operations. However, we focus not strictly, we focus mostly on children because anytime a child is involved, from the definition of federal law, state law, and even just the definition of human trafficking, it is human trafficking. Anytime an of-age person is involved, man, woman, whatever, it might be human trafficking, but it might not be. You
They
don't
might
know.
be
You have to dig into it.
prostitutes.
Say
That's
that, yeah, it would be
okay.
a lot of times it's prostitution. And I've worked as a dude. I go in and buy a prostitute. Hey, we'll pay this lady. And I asked this one lady, I'll never forget what she said to me. And I've probably actually been sat with and purchased maybe 2,000, maybe not quite 2,000 women in other countries and here. And then we sit and talk with them. And then we bring in advocates, other women that can talk with them. And I've never seen a single one leave at their own will. They don't leave. And I had one lady tell me one night right here in Birmingham, Alabama. She was in her late 40s. I said, ma'am, why do you do this? We've got these ladies right here behind me that are going to talk with you. They're going to give you some options out. We want to give you everything we can to make sure that you're not doing anything you want. She said, baby, I'm not going to leave. Where else am I going to make $1,500 a night? That's what she said. And okay, that's a fair statement. I can't argue with that, but is that human trafficking like we see it? The only way I can argue with it is morally. Morally, I believe this is wrong. Criminally, it's just a misdemeanor crime. Now, what we have seen is on the law enforcement side, when I work law enforcement, I show them my badge, you're going to go to the well house or you're going to go to jail. Well, what do they pick? They pick the well house. They don't want to go to jail. I'll go to the well house. And you do see some success out of that, forcing them to go to a place. You do see some success. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing either, but that's also not the job of law enforcement. It's not to, I hate to say it like this, it's not to be a bleeding heart for every person in need that's out there. And so that's why you see the struggle. So for us, we help with rescues in that manner because it removes law enforcement out of it, but we can set up a law enforcement type operation that's safe and get advocates in front of men and women who are stuck in the sex work industry and hopefully get them out of that. Now, the sting, we work with law enforcement. And the goal for the sting working with law enforcement is to arrest individuals who are buying or selling kids, who are showing up to buy or sell a kid if we do a reverse sting. And once we do that, then we rip their phone and we find more based on a probable cause warrant. We can find where there are real victims. We found a guy, we put him on an ICE hold and he got sent back to, I want to say it was from Honduras maybe, or maybe it was Guatemala. I can't remember, but he was from Central America or an illegal immigrant. And so he got put on an immigration custom enforcement hold, and we arrested him right here in Fultondale, Alabama. And a lady reached out 2 weeks after the operation. She sent a message and said, I just want to say thank you so much. This individual that y'all arrested and who was deported, and she reached out anonymously. She was an illegal immigrant as well. She said she was in her 30s, she said, and she said he would take me and beat me, lock me up, chain me in a trailer, made me perform sex acts, videoed it, did all this, would leave me in there for 3 or 4 days at a time, feed me, give me water. So, I mean, you talk about that's human trafficking as we think about it. Some woman in her 30s locked in a trailer, but she had no recourse. Why? She was an illegal immigrant, afraid to go to the police, afraid to do anything. But she said, thank y'all, because this guy did this to me. He was caught showing up to purchase a 14-year-old girl for sex and ultimately put on an ICE hold, deported. That's why we focus on these types of operations, is because there are real victims involved in these operations, but we found a way to remove the victims so we don't have to have a victim be a witness to testify against these individuals. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's why we focus solely on the stings.
Well, you mentioned the youngers. You've mentioned 18 months old. You've mentioned 3 and 4-year-olds. Now, and then you also said that most victims know or are acquainted with their perpetrators. Now, those children are too young to really interact a lot.
Right.
What does that look like? How do you identify the majority of 3 and 4 year olds who don't really converse? They're not out in public. How on earth do you get a tip? How do you find these victims to start trying to have a
You
sting?
don't, you find them in the phone, like when we ripped the phone and we had to look at pictures of a grown man having sex with an 18-month-old. That's the only way you find it. Because
So,
again,
so it's
for
people you're already catching for other things.
yeah, that and then victims, I heard a lady probably about your age telling her story when she was sold and raped as a 3-year-old, and for the majority of her childhood and then teenage years, that's what she went through. And so victims telling their story, and I will go ahead and say most of your women, what we found out, a lot of these women won't leave prostitution or the sex work industry, but most of them, matter of fact, I can't think of one that I've talked to and personally interviewed, and that's, getting up to a couple thousand that weren't assaulted, impacted, or a victim at some point in time when they were a child. Again, as young as 2 or 3 years old. A lot of them when they were 13, 14, or 15, whatever it is. So, I mean, it's at some point in time, I do believe everybody in that sex work industry, even if they're choosing to be there right now in the moment, at some point in time, I have seen that they were a victim. And when they're a child, most of the time it's somebody that they trust. And they're not going to go to the cops and say anything. And most of the time, they're not going to, even if they were a witness, they're not going to be a witness against somebody that they believe is supposed to love them. I mean, think of it this way. If your dad does those things to you, or your uncle does those things, somebody that you're supposed to trust and love, are you really going to trust law enforcement? I'm a
Mhm.
cop and I don't trust law enforcement at all. Don't ever talk to the cops. Cops are, they're the worst thing in the world to talk to. I'm going to talk to my attorney. I plead the fifth, all that stuff, right? That's the last thing a kid's going to want to talk to, because those who are supposed to protect them haven't been protecting them. So in their mind, why would this person who's not supposed to protect me protect me? So it's a very difficult shell to break through.
Have the majority, and that may have been what you were just referencing, but the majority of the people who are not autistic or truly mentally ill, but who are perpetrating these crimes upon
Yeah.
victims, are they also victims of sexual abuse?
I don't know. Some of them have been. Some of them have been. I would say probably the biggest thing I've seen is like I talked about earlier, a distinct transition in their life when you actually talk to them, and through pornography. This is not enough. This is not enough. This is not enough, and you see that degradation from what we watch and what we experience. And it's just so. No, I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to that, although that could be an aspect of it. I've seen more people that are vehemently opposed to this be advocates for the victims and putting these guys in jail and finding these guys because they experienced that when they were younger. I haven't seen too many individuals who experience this when they're younger, then perpetrating it on other people. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that that's not out there. I just haven't seen it that much.
So those of us who have visions of a rundown hotel in a bad part of town with 20 girls in a room and a person who's just bringing in people over and over. That's what you're saying. That's not the typical operation.
It happens, but it's extremely rare. It's
Okay.
extremely rare.
It's more
And
one-on-one.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I would
Is
say that's become prevalent now with the border situation. That has become a little more prevalent, but it's still, again, going back to that statistic, that would fall within that 7%, unless, of course, the person selling the girls is their uncle and it's his, 5 nieces or their mom. And we really see women working and selling girls in the sex industry more than men, probably. And then with the onset of the internet and stuff, women selling themselves because they have that level of protection. They don't need a man to protect them from other men anymore. They have that level of protection with the digital thing. They expect payment ahead of time. They can get it through Cash App. They can, vet out people. The other thing would be the OnlyFans deal. You got a lot of women. I would be surprised if you don't have listeners with as many people as follow you that's on here that are not don't have profiles on OnlyFans. Now, for some women, because I mean, everywhere I turn, I find a lady that it's like, holy cow, I didn't even know I went to school with this lady, and she's on OnlyFans, apparently. Every community. Now, here's the thing, it is something that removes the physical contact. So they feel okay about it. Well, for some women, they just don't mind the physical contact, whether it's because they're drugged up, or whether it's because they're drunk, or whether it's because they just don't care. They don't mind the physical contact. So, that's it's just a level of protection that's there now, that exists. So you don't see the pimp selling the girls anymore as much as you used to. Or I don't, when we go out and do a rescue. And again, I'm telling this as a guy, not as a guy who's like saying, hey, yeah, I heard this from a victim or whatever. No, we go out and we buy girls. This is what we do. We go to that rundown spot and we buy girls, and most of the time they're selling themselves. Very rarely do we find them being sold by other men. And oftentimes when there are other men, it's their boyfriend or their husband, and they're just kind of sitting in the bathroom waiting for their girl to finish their thing. You're kind of apathetic about it. So had plenty of conversations with those guys.
So, what toll you're a person of faith, and I know you're surrounded by people of faith, or just a lot of people of conviction. What toll has this taken on you just emotionally, what you have seen and what you continue to see?
I don't really, it hadn't really taken a toll on me, I don't think. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's just a sin fallen world. I mean, we've done it. When I was in the military, I was in the SEAL teams. We lost buddies, killed a lot of people, did a lot of stuff that everybody's like, oh my goodness, that's got to have some kind of emotional trauma. Not really. And this is the same thing with this. It doesn't, you don't like seeing kids being harmed, and that's why we do what we do. But it's not surprising. We're in a sin fallen world. We're in a world that is broken, and the only thing that fixes this world is the person of Jesus Christ. And so it gives us the opportunity to appreciate his grace and mercy even more, I guess. So I don't know if it's taken a toll on me, but it's really made me appreciate my Christian roots.
Mm. Well, I did hear, I think from some, I guess, newscast where people who have to look at the pornography over and over, who are in a sting operation, that can just at a point take, I think I heard this on Focus on the Family, I'm not sure, but where after you see just the degradation and the sin and the evil, that at some point it's just very hard to handle. But it sounds like you've got a good grasp.
I don't know if I got a good grasp on it, but I will say that Jesus Christ is the only person, is the only thing, is the only entity, whatever you want to call Jesus. Right? He was a man. Now we have his Holy Spirit here with us, especially if you're saved and he's in your heart. He's the only one that can protect you from this and remove you from it. Because if you hang out in a septic tank all day, some point in time you're going to smell like a septic tank, no matter what you do, how much you wash your hands and wash your feet and all that stuff. So that there is something to be said about that. With our team, everybody on our team is not Christians. Everybody on our team is not Christians, but I would say 95% of our team are believers, and that is our primary focus. We spend time in prayer, we spend time in the scripture, we spend time in the word, and you can't stay involved in it too long, right? Looking at things, meet people. You can't do it alone. You don't never find myself alone with especially if I'm out purchasing a lady, which I don't do many undercover operations anymore. But especially if I find myself out purchasing a lady, never have myself alone with that lady. We don't even have ourselves alone with ladies we work with here. I mean, it's just not it's not perceived as good. My wife wouldn't want that or wouldn't like it, and we have to make sure that we have those good fences built. So as an organization, we do that. In a world that wants everything to be blurred and mixed together, oh, men and women can all be the same thing. Well, I'm sorry, no, you can't. Sorry, lady, if you're broken down on the side of the road, if I'm by myself, I'll call somebody for you as I drive past, but I'm not going to stop and pick you up because I don't want to put you, me, or anybody else in that situation. It's kind of the same thing. We try to put those fences in place for our team and for our families, because I do believe it's vitally important to protect ourselves.
Well, what would you say to those watching or listening and they're thinking, I sure wish I could do something to help? How can we help?
I would say the first thing is if you're a believer, when believer, you know what I mean. If you're a brother or a sister in Christ, pray for us. If you're not a brother or sister in Christ, Ask God to reveal himself to you, and it will be in the person of Jesus Christ. And I encourage you to accept him for he is the Savior of the world. But if you are a believer, pray for us, pray for our organization, because we serve a mighty God who can provide everything that we need. And he has. He has successfully provided for us for the last, since 2019, I guess, since we got our 501c3 status. The other thing I would say is if you want to support financially, it costs money to run these operations. The average cost of an operation is $56,400 per op, and that's going to relate to 10 people being arrested. 10 people being arrested is going to be about, what was the number? If we averaged 100, that's going to be about 1,000 victims. Okay. So if you want to quantify it like that, I think we quantified it one time. If you want to look for victims impacted, it's like $52 or $54 a victim, something like that. It's like, 5,000-ish per arrest. So I don't care how you quantify it. It costs us about $50,000 to pull off an op. We run primarily on folks who say, hey, $50,000 is a lot of money. I give $100 a month. I can give $10 a month. That is really the biggest way that people help. I don't think people realize how big of a grassroots efforts we are, in the sense that we literally run on people who give $10 a month. Well, I'm not going to say who he is. But they give a monthly donation. They give a monthly donation to our organization and have for the past few years. If people knew how far that goes, and how if you have 1,000 people giving $100 a month, that makes a difference. And so that's what we need help with. More people knowing about it, and that financial support, no matter how little or how big you think it is, it goes a long way in the hands of God, and God's got his hand on our organization.
Absolutely love that. And I'm so glad we discovered you, your organization, and look forward to the event. And wow, God bless you for your work and for your heart for the victims. And anytime you want to come back, please do, because you're doing the Lord's work for sure.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And then I know you're going to put that out with the event. I think it's $50 a person. I don't even think you got to buy a table. I think it's $50 a person. Be a fun date night. If you wanted to do that, have a dinner and hang out and hear more about who we are as an organization. We've got some cool speakers. Sheriff Mark Moon's going to be there. Jennifer Bray, the district attorney from Marshall County. We have a few victims that are going to speak. Some other organizations, from the Well House and Trafficking Hope, that they're going to have a video playing. Some of them are going to be there, and then I'll wrap it up at the end, just kind of saying thank you for coming out. But I think it'll be a fun time. So if you want to show up, not expensive, and be a fun date night.
I do hope that a lot of you will come out who are local. And I assume if anyone somewhere else wants to bring you to their church, like in another state or region, they just reach out to you, and you travel and you speak and you share.
I do, yeah. They just reach out to covenantrescue.org, go on the website, and just send a message, say you heard me on the podcast. And even if I can't come out, we've got plenty of guys between me, our executive director, our COO, Josh, he does a pretty good job speaking. And some of our ladies, we've got some young ladies that work for us that present, like Taylor, Lindsay. And so we have plenty of people that can come and present and do a far better job than I could ever do. So even if I don't come out, we have people on the team that can make it out, present who we are, what we do, and we appreciate your support.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Thank you so much. And to all of you watching and listening, until next time, you have a fabulous rest of your day. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the SavvyCast. If you'll take the time to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, that would mean so much. As always, thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.